What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from Zoom again, and this time we are here with Ryan of Municipal Waste. Great to be able to talk with you, man. It's great for you to be here.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Congrats on another epic album. You guys have just been on fire for your whole career. We got Electrified Brain out now that just came out this past July 1st. Being that it was quite a while since the release of Slime and Punishment, 5 years at this point, did it just feel like you were kind of picking up where you left off after Slime and Punishment, or was this meant to be like a new beginning for Municipal Waste in a way?
Well, we actually had the record finished well before this year, but we waited because of all the state of the world, So, and we did an EP in between that called Last Rager. So it wasn't the 5 years doesn't seem like 5 years to me. You just take 2 of those years out because no one was doing shit. So, but yeah, we actually had more time to do this one, and to think about the songs. So I think that shows in the end product.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the whole Municipal Waste catalog, whether, it is off of Hazardous Mutation or The Art of Partying, Massive Aggressive, etc., like, I almost feel like Municipal Waste always has its own signature sound to it. Do you guys have, like, a usual songwriting formula that you stick with, or is there, like, some experimentation involved in the songwriting process?
Well, I think it's come to the point where we sound like ourselves. I think after 20 years, bands start to do that. But yeah, we take it from, a few different ways. It's real basic. We get in a room, whoever's got riffs presents them, we'll put them together with drums. And it's just like the old school way to do it. We all get in a practice room and just crank it out, and a lot of these were just coming so fast to us. Like, everyone's bringing stuff to the table between me, Nick, and Phil, riff wise. So, I mean, there's a plethora of riffs to go around. We just record it on a boombox or our phone, send it to Tony. Sometimes I'll write some stuff. Most of the time he sends some stuff back. I mean, it's old school, man. We don't really, overthink it.
Yeah, I don't think it's the old school way. I think it's the Richmond way. That's how I call it.
Hey, all right, sure, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
You're up in New York, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. In fact, actually, I'm from a house near the Gramercy Theater, but the last one of the last times I saw you guys was actually on Warsaw with Nuclear Assault.
I love that area. I love Greenpoint, man. I get tattooed up there. My buddy Dave English tattoos right around the corner. Like, I spent a lot of time up there, so that's like a second home now too.
Yeah, Greenpoint is where it's at.
And I'm Polish too, so I go to Polka Dot and eat too.
And hey, when you played at Warsaw, did you try the pierogies there?
Oh yeah, amazing.
Yeah, they're epic. I love that whole neighborhood.
We can't get them like that down here, so yeah, I always enjoy going to Brooklyn for that.
You don't get good Polish food in Richmond?
I mean, not like up there, man. Not the authentic stuff.
Yeah, fair enough. I do need to ask you this, though. I know we're going to focus a lot on the new album, but I wanted to get this question out of the way. But next year is the 20-year anniversary of the debut full-length Municipal Waste album, Waste 'Em All. Can you guys maybe foresee doing some sort of celebration like that? Like we've seen a lot of great anniversary tours in a way, or does Municipal Waste like to focus more on the present?
Well, not to bring it totally down. We did do that before, and our drummer passed away about 6 years ago on that album, Brandon. So we actually reunited with him probably about 10 years ago and did a Waste 'Em All show and with our old bass player Andy, who's still one of my best friends. So we could get Andy to come back for sure. I would just wanted to do justice to Brandon, and do those songs. So I mean, we still play Waste 'Em All songs, in our current set list, but doing a Waste 'Em All without Brandon seems a little not right to me. You know what I mean? Like his drumming was such an important part of that record. He was 18, hungry, and it really set the tone for the band. So I'm not counting it out, but just off the cuff, I wouldn't want to do it without him.
And I totally understand that
Yeah.
and respect it. When it comes to like, and I think, with Municipal Waste, despite you guys having like a good sense of humor in the band and, always like, I think a Municipal Waste show is always about fun and excitement, but it almost seems like you have a dedicated fan base where you guys really do speak to people to help them with, I think you guys are a great representation of also overcoming difficult times and trials and tribulations.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I have a lot of people write me that say that we've got them through tough times, and that's my favorite kind of message to get. And I always write everyone back, as much as I can. And it's therapy, man. It's like we all have gone through tough shit. We're a DIY band that's pretty much done it ourselves the whole way. So we get it, man. We're just up there doing it just like anyone going to a show. So we try not to have a barrier between us and the audience.
Yeah, and being that like there is again like a good sense of humor. I remember interviewing Tony at the Nuclear Assault show that you guys did, and again, you guys are just. I love the vibe and the humor that you all portray, but the music is also very technically impressive. Like those riffs are not exactly beginner riffs that you're all playing, and so like when it comes to like the songwriting, is it like at all maybe kind of like a moment of seriousness in a way for the band too?
I mean, I've always taken it serious. So, like writing a riff, I don't go, "Hey, this is a funny riff." I've never once said that in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I like jokes, but the music, we always take it serious. So I don't think that it would be a terrible band if we thought the riffs were funny. But I mean, to me, it's not super technical. I mean, we all come from punk and hardcore as much as I'm a heavy metal fan. So I mean, I think simplicity is key still. Like we always try not to overplay. I mean, there's enough bands. It's funny that you think this is technical because there's so many more technical bands out there. I think people coming from the punk community go, "Oh, that's technical," and I always try to meld the two together. Like if we're gonna have a metallic riff, it will back it off with like something more straightforward and aggressive, like hardcore punk riff after it. So that's always the balance with Municipal Waste.
So if somebody listens to your music and says, "Wow, those riffs are so technically impressive and they're shredders," does that
They're
make
a punk
them
rocker.
that makes them more punk rock?
and that's cool with me, man, because I am too.
That's so funny how making a miscalculation about a band makes you less of a poser.
Well, I don't know, man. I mean, call it technical. I don't consider myself a super technical player. I'm really just a bass player playing guitar. That's what I've always considered it.
Well, I mean, there is a great essence of rhythm behind it, right? Like, I feel like it's very rhythmic based. Do you sometimes like prefer to have like a drum pattern or some sort of like tempo to follow when you're writing riffs?
We play fast. I think one thing I can pride myself on is I can pick really fast, and Nick, adding Nick on guitar has added a higher technical element. Like a lot of the leads we've introduced on the new record, like are stuff that I could never do that Nick is just shredding straight through. So I guess now that you mention it, like the new record is more technical.
Yeah, 100.
I did one solo on it. You got to figure out which one, and some other little doodles in there. But we try not to take credit for who did what.
Yeah, and it is like I think a big misconception in the world of metal where like in order to be a technically good guitar player, it means that you have to be like Eddie Van Halen or Marty Friedman or something like that. I mean, you look at Dino from Fear Factory, who's a straight riff machine, and that stuff is still technically impressive as well. So
I think it's more about songwriting. A good song is a good song. It doesn't have to be like impossible to play. Actually, if it is, it's probably not a good song in my mind, at least.
yeah, there are plenty of shit songs with guitar solos.
Right on.
Yep. And kind of going back to that whole punk rock mentality, I had a couple discussions about this. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about because to me, when I'm listening to punk rock or hardcore, to me, it's just as loud and aggressive as in your face as what we would hear in a band like Slayer or Cannibal Corpse or any sort of metal band. What would you say is the ultimate difference between metal and punk rock?
It's funny because like I think it comes from the same place. That you get all these people dividing everything into subgenres, and you'll find out that most metal musicians like punk coming up. I mean, it's such an age-old topic. I mean, I think the attitude is important. I think metal can put things like if you do it wrong, you can put it on a pedestal and think you're too good for the audience, or you think yourself higher. I think punk rock kind of brings you back down to earth, and that's what we've always tried to maintain with our band, is just being down to earth but throwing heavy metal on top of it. So it's a crossover thing. It's been done, but we try to like stick to that.
Definitely. And another thing with Municipal Waste I've noticed is I've seen you guys play in a variety of different style of venues too. Like I've seen you, at like Live Nation venues that are pretty big, and then I've seen you at, plenty of like clubs that have that underground feel behind it. Being that you guys have sort of like punk rock roots in a way, if you're playing at like a venue that has like a barricade and, stricter security and it's more massive, does that almost, for lack of better words, kind of like hinder the sort of punk rock DIY vibe in a way?
Yeah, we don't like the barricades. Sometimes there's nothing we can do about it. It's a security thing with the club. So, as long as we get to do a little bit of everything, we're happy. It's just it just puts a divide with the audience, and our show's about people stage diving and just being involved. So I mean, even the Warsaw, you don't see as many stage dives. It's also like it's a coast thing too, or a European thing. Like, so we know some places are just going to go nuts no matter what the situation is, and you just got to roll with it. I mean, we'll play these festivals where we're like 25 feet away from the crowd, so you just have to make them do stuff from a distance, and we learned early on how to work that kind of crowd and still make it a waste show, which took a little bit to figure out, but it's really just talking shit to the audience and seeing what they'll do.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Do you almost like have to practice stage presence or crowd interaction as much as you have to practice like the songs itself?
I mean, it just comes from being on tour. If you're practicing that, your people would see through that. I mean, that's kind of silly to think. It's like, all right, let's practice our stage presence today at the rehearsal room. I mean, there's probably bands that do that. More power to you. But I think it just goes from being out there and being on the road for 20 plus years. It just comes with experience.
Yeah.
Or some people got it, some people don't. Luckily we got a couple guys we can tell jokes up there and break the ice.
Definitely. When it came to Electrified Brain now with the current album, was there at all like maybe a preconceived idea of what you and the band wanted it to sound like, or was there at all like maybe some trial and error involved or some sort of like improvising?
Yeah, there's always trial and error. Some of the material we brought back and reworked, because like I said before, we had a lot of time. So we honed in on some stuff, and a lot of it, you can't pre-plan it, it just happens organically in the practice room, or, it's not like, okay, this album's going to be this. We never sit down and say that. We're making a Municipal Waste record. What I wanted to try was a little bit of tempo diversity on this, and actually hit some more mid-pace, even a few little slow parts that you normally wouldn't hear in a Municipal Waste record. And I think all across the board, there's more variety on it, even though it's aggressive, intense, as always. I think we always try to push the dynamics a little differently moving forward. So, I mean, if you're a fan of the old stuff, you'll see that on this new record.
Well, what I've noticed with Electrified Brain is something that I don't consider this album what I like to call shuffle friendly, where some people just put up the songs on shuffle and just let it go wherever. But I don't
think any album should be on shuffle. I think a playlist with a different band should be on shuffle. But you'll find most musicians would get mad if you're shuffling their record because there's always an order to it.
Well, I'm going to musician hell then in that case. But
hey, you do what you want. But I mean, there's thought put into the order always.
And that led me perfectly into the next question, because I can't listen to this album without starting with Electrified Brain and ending with Paranormal Janitor. So like, were all these songs maybe written chronologically in the order that were in, because they flow so perfectly?
And there's also a sample that ends with Paranormal Janitor that totally loops back in to the beginning. Like, we have two more ambient kind of like this. Arthur, our producer engineer, like helped add these samples in the beginning and end. But yeah, I'm a stickler for order. So is Tony. Tony came up with a really cool order, and we just made a few changes on this one. Normally I totally like overthink that shit. Like in set lists, I'm always thinking about the flow, so it's very important to us. But yeah, I think this order, I wouldn't change it,
I'd imagine when you're playing live with the release of every album, it gets harder to put a set list together, right?
It is. Luckily, we have short songs and we can squeeze a few new ones in. So yeah, the sets just get longer. But I honestly don't like either seeing or playing more than 45 minutes. Like, if I think if a band of this like intensity, 45 is enough. I'd be burned out even watching it if it was more than 45. So we'll pull a few old songs out just to squeeze a few new ones in, but we try to play everything from the whole catalog.
Yeah, 45 minutes is pretty much the average length of any prog band for one song. So,
and I love prog music, but that's what I'm listening to in the van riding down the street. If Municipal Waste went prog, I mean, I'd be stoked, but I probably would just have to do another project to get that rock off.
That would be epic trolling, though, if you were to totally surprise your fans.
Dude, I'm seriously listening to like Eloy and Camel and Wishbone Ash and all, like so much like British and German prog.
Yeah,
I think the older you get, you start to appreciate that stuff more.
Porcupine Tree is back now too, so that's a great throwback for Prague.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, being that you mentioned you had a bit of time between Slime and Punishment and now, is what we're hearing on these songs? Did these songs at all change a lot through the course of between when you started writing and releasing it, or is what we're hearing pretty much how these songs were originally structured?
Well, everything changes, from the get-go, minus a few of them that were just kind of stuck the same. It's funny, like Demoralizer, I had a bunch of those riffs before Slime and Punishment, and I was still a one guitar band, and I had that harmony at the beginning, and we would play it at practice, and I could layer it and make that harmony happen, like that Thin Lizzy style, like Maiden harmony that's in there. But obviously with one guitar, it's not going to translate as well. So we resurrected that song now that we have two guitar players, and it turned out to be one of my favorite ones, the second track on the record.
Definitely. And another question I wanted to ask with kind of going back in time in the Municipal Waste catalog, but this year is the 10-year anniversary of the Fatal Feast.
Oh, wow.
I was just wondering, maybe going down memory lane a little bit, because you mentioned, what you were doing with Demoralizer and your riffing process. How has like the songwriting process in just a decade for Municipal Waste, or maybe not songwriting process, but the evolution, what would you say was a big change between then and now, and what are some fond memories of the Fatal Feast era?
Well, definitely adding Nick on second guitar. I can't say that enough. It's added so much. It's all, you think about that kind of thing. You're like, why didn't we do that earlier? Even though, other members probably said we should get a second guitar player. I don't know if I was stubborn, but it always had to be Nick. Nick and I play in Bat together and Vulture together. And so we had the chemistry already. But so adding Nick is the biggest difference. And then that's adding one more guy that can bring riffs to the table. Fatal Feast was, man, it's hard. That's like, 10 years, huh?
Yep. I was in high school.
That was our first one for Nuclear Blast. We went up and recorded in New Jersey at Trax East. And this guy, Eric Rachel, who was a old school producer who did worked on the Skid Row self-titled. I think they did that record in Trax East, like a low budget record that went gold. It's up on the wall. There's a couple jams on that record, Youth Gone Wild and whatnot.
Definitely.
And so Dave's a Jersey guy. So Dave had recorded with Eric before, and we went up there. We vibed with him. We did all the stuff in house up in Jersey, like a destination recording, and it was fun, man. I mean, we did Art of Partying like that. We went up to Massachusetts and camped out and did, stayed somewhere and then recorded a record. So it's fun to do it like that. These days, there's so much remote stuff happening. We record vocals down in Florida. I record vocals here. We recorded the music in Philly, so I kind of miss doing it all in one place,
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that too, because being that, Municipal Waste is such, a live-driven band with the crowd interaction and the stage presence and, all that fun DIY vibe. But, you're playing in a studio where it's sometimes more confined, or, you guys are separated, like you said. Is it at all make it a challenge to kind of replicate that live energy on an album when you're in kind of like a more static environment like a studio?
I mean, recording is hard. You could be the greatest player, and then the moment that red light goes on, you could forget everything, or you could kind of stress yourself out. So it's always hard no matter where you are. I don't care how good you are. But we do all record together, both guitars, bass, and drums in one room. So that's how you're going to get that live recording. Yeah, we'll go and do the guitars and everything over again, but we're jamming with a drummer with Dave in the same room. And that studio in Philly where Arthur works out of is the coolest vibe drum room. Like the drum sound, everything's wooden and looks all 70s. And, we got the best drum tone from this record, I think, like to date for Waste, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's very crisp.
And that's important. And we don't use any samples or triggers or, we don't even use a click track. So that's what keeps it live, because we're playing live to our tempo, to Dave's tempo. And, it might be tighter if we do, but then you'd lose that live energy that you're talking about. So I think the dynamic and the feel can go up and down just a little bit. And that's what makes it sound live, because it literally is live.
When you have to do multiple takes or something like that, which I'd imagine that has happened before, does that like almost take away some of the energy or like the organic nature of it in a way?
I mean, it's going to, but the pressure's on the drummer. Like he's got to get it from start to finish, and we always start with drums. I think most bands do, or at least that's how we've always done it. So the pressure's on him, and the first few days are just for Dave, and he'll like bang them all out in one day and be like, all right, and then I was like, do you want to do anything tomorrow? And we go back and listen to him and did a few more like that were happening towards the end of the night.
Yeah.
But when people get tired, I mean, we're tired there just tracking with them. So I was like, man, let's just start fresh tomorrow. We did that in the pandemic, and everyone's masked up, and it's such a weird vibe in the air. And we're in Philly, which is like wall-to-wall people, and everyone's in masks. And it was a strange time, man. But I was just happy to be recording music.
Absolutely. And I have
another beer. One sec.
Oh, yeah. No worries. All right. And I have a few more questions for you, but kind of going back to the EP, which you talked about in the beginning of this interview, because you did, as you mentioned, release The Last Ranger between Slime and Punishment and now, and you released a fair amount of EPs. I might be overthinking it completely, but sometimes when a band releases an EP, I've always noticed that there's some sort of different, for lack of better words, context around it. Sometimes it's meant to be like a trailer for the direction that the band is going into, or it is like a list of B-sides. When you release an EP, is that almost kind of like a different process or a different mind frame? Like with The Last Ranger, did it feel like it was any different than recording an album or something?
Well, without giving TMI, the label wanted an extra EP, so we could go, here's an EP.
Okay. Okay.
They added an amendment, and a lot of people don't know that, but Wave of Death, we were really stoked on, and we just had to make some songs to showcase Wave of Death. I like everything we've done. I would never put out anything that's, subpar, but I mean, we blazed that thing out. They wanted one, and we gave it to them.
All right. Fair enough. Yeah, because I've always wondered, like, I'll never forget interviewing a band. Ironically, they were a prog band, so maybe that's why. But yeah, we're releasing a new EP, which it was just as long as any other full-length album. But like,
it's a prog EP. It's longer than all our records put together, probably.
Yep, you could be 45 minutes late to their set and make it for the first chorus. But when it. Like, I've always wondered that if maybe when they're releasing an EP, there's almost kind of like a different meaning behind it, or some sort of like different side of the band in a way. I almost feel like sometimes a band releases an EP as a means of like experimentation, or kind of like a one-off going outside their comfort zone or something.
You're giving us way too much credit, man. This is Municipal Waste. I mean, it is what it is, man. I mean, I'm glad. I think it's a way to break up the albums. For me, I think it's like giving the fans something to hold them over. That's the way I look at it.
Definitely. And the final question I wanted to ask you is going back to your guitar playing. In order to get like that inspiration, that creative drive to write riffs and come up with ideas, does inspiration just sometimes strike out of the blue, or do you kind of have like a usual man cave that you go into to kind of like explore different ideas, like a place that you go to?
It happens in different times. I think it's different for everyone. If I'm angry, that's a good time to write Municipal Waste songs. It keeps it intense, but we're been doing it for so long. It's like, okay, it's time to write music, and we sit down and like, I'll just bash out some shit on the guitar, and then Phil and Nick do the same. I mean, it's weird. It's one of those things you don't think about anymore. There is times to write music, and that's when we just kind of put our writing hats on.
Okay. There's like different hats, the writing hat, the live hat, and all that.
I mean, there's really no hats, but...
Fair enough. And by the way, that line you said, you're giving us too much credit, this is Municipal Waste, I think that you got to use that quote somewhere.
Well, let's use it in this interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe that could be the name of the greatest hits compilation.
I always wanted to call that You're Welcome.
Oh, okay. That's a good idea. Yeah, everybody, we are here with Municipal Waste. Be sure to check out Electrified Brain. If you haven't already, it is absolutely epic. We will see you next time on Heavy New York.